We're back. I am gonna try and start releasing episodes um, more than just every 6 months. The last one I did was with Pastor Josh Scribner, and then I went off to basic training and tech school and all that good stuff. Came back, started immediately working, going back to teaching, and so anyways, life got busy. But I got back, and I was like, man, I really want to start releasing more episodes. And so again, I have a plan. I have an idea of what I want to start doing. That way, I'm not putting too much pressure on myself to, you know, release every week, maybe twice a month, once a month, whatever it is. I just want to try and get content out there, and then again, start continuing to speak to guests, continuing to have people on that I know. And one of the first people that comes to mind always is who I'm having on today. Actually, two people I'm having on today. Jessica Greer, who I one of the reasons that I kind of got discouraged a little bit with posting a lot was because when me and Jess talked, I got demonetized, or I got the second strike for talking about COVID. And I know this was a long time ago. I probably shouldn't even say that word. But I got taken off of YouTube, and I was left with one more strike, or I would be my channel would be completely taken down. And so it just kind of was like, man, it was a bummer, kind of a blow. But then obviously that's all, you know, in the past and stuff. But so that was kind of like just a bummer to deal with that. And so it kind of threw a just um just problems that I had to overcome. But anyway, so I'm back though. I really want to talk to Jess again. We'll try and steer clear of the V word and the C word. Um, but uh, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to them. I have actually Gwen as well, and so she was like, Aaron, can I please, 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 please be on? No, I'm just kidding. She didn't say that. No, but I wanted both of them on. And so I'll give them ample time to introduce themselves. And then we'll kind of get into what I wanted to talk to them both about. Jess, you are now a reoccurring guest. Welcome back. For those that haven't listened to the first episode, or were about to click that play button on YouTube and then all of a sudden it disappeared, maybe you could just reintroduce yourself and tell some people who you are.
Hi, yeah, I know. I'm really sorry about that. And remember, I did message you to let you know this is probably going to get taken off. And I knew immediately. I was like, oh my gosh, what did we just do? But my name is Jessica Greer, and yes, I am. What am I trying to say? I'm in, like Aaron. I'm in education. I was a social studies teacher, high school social studies teacher. Um, I mostly taught like world history, U.S. history, and then now I transitioned into like a new role as an instructional specialist, curriculum coordinator. And I have 3 kids, and I've been saved for, geez, like 23 years now. Living in Tucson, married for like almost 17 years. And yeah, I'm just trying to serve God and like not, not, and make like decisions of discernment like everybody else, figure out what's yes, what's no, what's left, what's right. And so anyway, yeah, that's why I like coming on here and just talking, not because like there's any matter of fact answers. I'm like not an expert in anything at all. I'll just say that. But I do enjoy having a conversation to try to discover like what's true about the world and have that conversation in front of people so that they are, kind of like encouraged to also figure out what the heck is true and what's purely insane. Yeah. So thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, of course. It's a privilege that I'm even able to have this platform. But I remember us having that talk about this might get taken off, and I was like, I don't know, I don't think so. And then I immediately got an email. I was like, because that my head thing was like, I'm so small. Like, who even pays attention to
Yeah.
like what I'm saying? Like, who cares? But immediately YouTube was like, you have one more chance. And I was like,
Yeah. The
oh man.
AI algorithm is no joke. I think they literally could figure out like instantly who's saying the wrong thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Well, Gwen, why don't you tell the people who you are? And I tease Gwen. I've known her forever. She did not beg me 1,000 times. It was like I reached out and said, Gwen, I want you on. Would you be willing to come on with me and Jess? And so, Gwen, why don't you just introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, my name is Gwen Cruz, and I a lot of what I have to say is similar to Jessica. Um, uh, I have a degree in teaching. I've done, several things in the education world, I guess. But right now, I stay home with my two kids, and my husband is. We're here pastoring in Roswell, New Mexico, and just a lot of what Jessica said is, you're just trying to decipher between a worldview and what's wrong, what's right. Is your biblical worldview, is it is it straight, is it direct, is it what the word of God is aligning with, all these different things that we're having, I guess, as just adults. Probably every adult before us who was made the decision to live for Christ has to live with and make decisions for. And so yeah, that's pretty much it. Been saved. I actually, it's going to be 20 years that I'll be saved on June 24th this year. So that's pretty exciting. I'm pretty excited about that. I can't even believe that I've done something for 20 years, I guess.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's longer
Is
than I've been
it?
alive. Just kidding.
All right.
I'm just kidding. You guys aren't that old. I'm just kidding again.
We're
Um,
about as old as Aaron is.
I'm gonna be 29 this year. It
Yeah,
is
that
I'm
it
gonna
is
be
sad.
40 this year.
Wow,
I
congratulations.
know.
That's pretty amazing.
I'm a
Well,
middle-aged lady.
one of the things that Gwen, you mentioned. Actually, I'll start with you, Jess. You mentioned that you don't have it all figured out, and of course, and you're not an expert at anything. Actually, is what you said. And the reality is like a lot of people aren't experts really on these things that we're going to talk about today. Um, and I think that's part of the problem is that so many people really just are not willing to listen or not willing to learn, and yet are so willing though to step out into the limelight and just talk about things that they really don't know anything about. And I'm not saying that we are experts in this area at all, but it's like, why not us? That's kind of like been my mantra for the last couple years, and since I started here, I was like, why not my voice being out there? Why not me sign up for the military? If not, if no, if, we call other people to arms and all these different things. Well, why not myself? Or pastors have had that type of mindset for years. I mean, Isaiah talked, here I am, Lord, send me. So that's kind of like been my, you know, just mindset is that you don't have to be an expert on these things to just share your opinion. And I think one of the issues is that a lot of people are sharing their opinion as just my way or the highway. If you don't agree with what I'm saying, then I want no part of you. Um, and so it's just it breaks my heart, especially in these last couple of weeks where we are seeing just this full dive into these protests on college campuses and these chants um, of death to America, death to Jews, just this full backing of a terrorist organization in Hamas. Um, and so it just really breaks my heart because a lot of these kids, I think if you would pull them aside and say, hey, man, why are you doing this? They wouldn't necessarily say, well, I agree with, death to America, death to Jews. It's that they just are willing to put themselves out there with a lack of understanding because they are willing to back something that, they just want to be a part of something. I know I'm kind of talking a lot, but I wanted to ask you guys this question, maybe even before we get to the protest. And I told my students this. I was like, I know it's trendy to hate America right now, but you have the freedom to do so because of what America stands for,
Mhm.
because of who we are. And so I guess let me pose that question to you though, something I ask myself. And I know it's happened before in history where the youth, they speak out and they protest and et cetera, et cetera. But let me ask you guys this. I'll start with you, Jess. Why do you think it's so trendy right now to just truly hate the United States, truly hate America, where so many are willing to just stand behind someone where they're screaming for the death of their own nation?
So, I mean, I've been thinking for a while and talking about for a while. We've talked about this before on your podcast, but like going back to what you said about the expert thing, and I'm trying to like make a straight line here, but we do live in a time of like expert culture. That's why I said like I'm not an expert, because everyone's like an expert culture. Like I outsource my thinking to the experts. If you're not an expert, like you shouldn't even be having this conversation. And I do think that that's part of an ideological trend that's literally like giving people like it's a weird quid pro quo, or like conspiracy that we're having with other like the expert world, where we're saying I'm going to outsource my thinking and my responsibility to somebody else. I'm not going to hold myself responsible for how I respond, and even when the world turns upside down and whatever, like it's not my responsibility because there's an expert that's going to tell me what to do. And so if things go right, they go wrong, I just put it on an expert. So that expert culture, right, that expert thinking. But going back to hating America, I think it came from the expert voice in the room, because that's how you think when you go to, when I went to college, and it's like 20 years ago, so it's like way worse now. You go to college and it's like the professor's the expert in the room. He's the great sage. He's the great authority on the subject. He wrote 14 books that nobody's read, but he's made every student buy. Like that's the reality. So you don't have the right. And I do remember having conversations and little debates, back in the day, where they would say, well, you're professor, are you a professor? Like, are you an expert? And so that kind of like that expert culture thinking started years ago. And it was like, you don't have the right to speak against a professor, because have you done, and don't get me wrong, I'm like not against academia and science. In fact, I think we're living in the dark ages because people don't follow the science. But what I am saying is that that trendiness, it came from a very tiny group of people who used to be like fringe, who started to infect the thinking of every single person, because the postmodernists believed in clean slate theory, right? That like every single person is just merely an impression of an impression of an impression. Like there's this a nihilistic nothingness of a world that we live in. There's no objective truth. Whoever writes the narrative wins the war. It's a power struggle, the oppressor versus the oppressed. And this goes back and forth. And so because of that, naturally America being this, for many reasons, but for being a superpower, for being a powerful country, a rich country, your occupiers, your colonialists, your, whatever, your oppressors. And automatically you're an oppressor. So of course there's all kinds of contradictions in this. And the contradiction is essentially that you can't even talk like that if you were truly living with oppressors, like you said to your students. But I do think that that's one part of it. I think the other part of it, to take it to the conservative corner, is that we've all kind of fallen for this narrative thing. I used to teach US history, and I used to have parents who were really uncomfortable with how much you taught about slavery, because there was a pretty conservative school and they didn't want to have that conversation, and they felt like you were really, attacking America. So I do think that there was this belief that US history is all about making sure the United States is a good country with good people. But when you write history according to a narrative, you open up an opportunity for somebody to come in and write their own narrative, rather than just trying to put together a contextual view. Now, it's one thing to have like Christian history where you're looking at Christians throughout history. But I'm talking about a narrative that says these are the good guys, and that started with everybody. So I do think that now we're feeling the repercussions of just that postmodern narrative war. And now the people who have really have this coordinated effort with Hollywood, with universities, with huge donors, money, Soros, whatever, they all put their stuff together, and now they've coordinated an effort that's now made America and the West into the big great demon. Anyway, sorry, I'll stop here. But the other third part of that, I would say, is something Ayaan Hirsi Ali, Oriana Fallaci, and others have been warning us about for many, many years now, about this radical Islamic world that has been eating and corroding at the rest of the West. And I believe in a leftist, racist view of the world. They've allowed them as, poor, oppressed brown people to come and have their say. And they've even used them, I think, in the Middle East in different ways. But now it's just become so out of control that they have no control over this boiling over sentiment that's bled into the rest of the world and just infected and radicalized even our own American people.
Yeah, but I think honestly it's a little bit more in my opinion, it's not so broad. It actually just comes down to a yearning of the human heart, and something that is spoken to these kids or whatever they are, that has given them a place, a platform, a sense of significance, because that wasn't established anywhere in their lives. And so, we talk about in the church world all these different things, the breakdown of the family, and all these loaded words, I guess. But if you want to break it down, that's literally what it is. Are these kids who grew up, for whatever reason, in a group think mentality, because that's, they weren't home with mom and dad. They weren't, pushing ideas and getting feedback from their parents. They weren't having these dialogues every evening, kind of just throwing up all the stuff that they've heard all day and getting, a sound feedback from a parent who's like, what the heck? Like, why do you think that? That's stupid. No, they're not being checked. And so they've come into this group think mentality, and nobody to steer them left or right. And then when I guess a supposed adult or expert, because to them it's one and the same, it's really that surface, it's really that fickle, tries to check them or tries to be like, no, what are you talking about? It's like, well, let me get me and my 49 buddies, even though I can't stand all by myself. My philosophy isn't my own philosophy. It's me and these 15 other people. But get me alone in a room, get one of them alone in a room. They're not gonna, the argument's not gonna stand up.
For sure. and going back to kind of like the who's the authority in the room. It's so I've said this for a long time, is that these teachers, they're quote unquote they're the smartest person in the room, and it's because that they have the degree, they know, they sound like they know what they're talking about often. No one is there to challenge them. Even in college, no one was there to challenge them, at least in my education system. I mean, in college I challenged a little bit when it was like happening with the bathrooms back in whatever 2015 it was, with like grown men, burly haired, chested, all these wanted to use a girl's bathroom, and I pointed that out, and my professor was like, so what? And I was like, what do you mean, so what? What do you mean? Like, I have 5 sisters, a mom. I wouldn't want anyone using a bathroom with them that looks like that. And then one girl, actually, she didn't know that she was doing this, but she completely just helped me out. She was like, well, if a guy does that, then that just means he's mentally ill. And I was like, yeah, that's my point. That's my point, is that we're saying, if we go down your train of thought, is that anyone that identifies as a woman can use the bathroom, even if it's for that 10 minutes that they want to identify as a woman, then they can. And so but it was like, number one, no one is challenging that professor except for what I just said to that professor in front of a classroom. And number two, it's like, even when you do challenge them, you have, these other students who are like, why are you doing this? I'm gonna back this professor up. Because again, they think that the professor or whoever it is the end all be all, that they know everything, and they're not wrong. And so one of the things that I do as in my history class is we obviously we talk about slavery. Obviously, we talk about the wrongdoings that America has been a part of. But I always preface with this: is that we don't celebrate people, or we don't celebrate countries, nations, whatever it is, for the wrong they do. We celebrate them that in spite of their wrong, in spite of what they did, they came back from it. Whether it's Martin Luther King, whether it's Malcolm X, whether it's the United States, we're always the beautiful thing about our nation is we're always correcting our wrongs. We're self-correcting our wrongs, and we're saying, yeah, that was a big mistake, and so we're going to self-course correct, and so we're going to make sure that we are back where we need to be. And the problem right now that I'm seeing, especially on college campuses, is that we are just so blatantly just setting our course for something that is just so radical, and it's just, in my mind, it's like so blatantly there, and yet so many people, so many of these students are just going right behind it. It made more sense to me, the Vietnam protests, for sure. Then, I mean, what's happening now makes the Vietnam protests look, so small. I mean, these kids are quote, barricading themselves in with cardboard. I don't know how much they understand that's not really a barricade, but they're taking over college campuses, and all in the name of what? Not keeping Americans home, not keeping them from entering a draft that for a war that we shouldn't be a part of. If you believe that, or if you don't believe that, it's not really my point. But no, they're doing this, and then as they're doing this, saying, death to the Jews, backing a terrorist organization, and so
Right.
and death to America, and all these different things. So it's it's just we're heading down this, and so I'm wondering, like, when are we going to course correct? But before we even maybe try and figure out a solution, why? I mean, you guys are seeing the protests. What do you think is what is your take on what is happening right now?
Well, I think it's again, it's I mean, if I were to slap one word on it, which is really hard, it would be uneducated. Because you're talking about, these, a lot of these kids are, I don't even know, I don't even want to call them kids. I don't know what they are. People, individuals, um, since we're into all the nouns now. Talking about all this stuff about, oh, well, it's just retaliation for being occupied. They're just kind of getting back at what's been done to them, all of these things. But if we were to go down the educated route, the Gaza Strip hasn't been under Israeli rule of any type since 2006. And so they've been under the rule of Hamas, or whatever the heck they were called at that point. And so, you want to talk about, they've been occupied, they've been, it's, if they were their own government, they were kind of just ruled by the Israel. That's not true. They were completely and completely their own government since 2006. So we're not talking about 5-10 years ago. This has been going on for a while, and so you're talking about children who are now adults that grew up under this regime, in a sense, and these children can tell you basically all of the hell that they've lived due to this occupation, or to this regime. And they can be the people who give their own testimony. This is not just hearsay. This isn't just some social media mumbo jumbo. These are actual people that have lived under this kind of government for this long. And you see all these signs, this signage and all this stuff at the protests, gays for Gaza, all these different things. Are you kidding me? You drop some of, some homosexuals into the Gaza Strip right now, or into those territories, and let's see what happens. You want to talk about women's groups, this for Gaza, all these different things. Do you know how women are treated there? This is what I'm talking about. It's this complete, it's it's mind boggling. There's no education, there's no truth, there's no foundation behind any of the things that they're saying. Because they're just completely uneducated. It's like somebody was just like, let's just go do this stuff on this one place and let's go. And then they just kind of all just run after him. They have no idea. You look at all the footage, you see all the footage that happened on October 7th. And you're talking about women who were, violated and then beheaded and all these different things. I wonder where the women's groups are now. All these women's lib, all these groups. You're so fired, you're so gung ho.
Well, one of the women's groups actually came out and was like, yeah, this happened, but, and threw a little but in there, like justifying that, well, yes, we understand what happened, but it was justified.
Yeah. And that goes back to like the oppressor oppressed narrative, right? Because ultimately, like, no matter, like, so the Black Lives Matter movement in Chicago, like, literally within 24 hours posted an icon of like paragliders saying that they stand with Palestine. So obviously the paragliders came from the Hamas attack on October 7th. That was never an icon before that day of brutality, right? So we know what they're saying, that they stand with not just Palestine, the people, but they stand with Hamas. They stand, in fact, it was just a resistance movement. And they even said it was a successful resistance movement. So we already know that there is this persuasion, this ideological persuasion that is all about, it's like a bizarre neo-Marxist, postmodern, nihilistic belief that everything just really does. That's why everything is so simplified. So going back to what you said about being educated, I do think, like, just from an educator perspective, when I walk into a classroom and there's like a group of kids that are like cussing on their phones, eating hot Cheetos with like disgusting fingers, I don't know what all of the situation is, but I do know that people are not learning, right? And I'm sure, Aaron, you'd say the same thing. Like, if you know those teachers who have those classes where kids are completely out of control and they let them do whatever they want, and you know that people are not learning. And so what do people who, like, students who are not learning do? They disrupt learning. This is why you have to, like, be really good at what you do and have procedures and really have a target in place, because you're like, okay, what are you guys supposed to be learning today? Like, what's your objective? Like, what the heck are you supposed to be doing? And so if you go down to a college campus where there's a bunch of students who are disrupting the learning, and it's not just protests of like the traditional inheritance of the United States. I agree. Like, our country is not built on this concept that you just upend the entire system every time something's wrong. In fact, what makes it so amazing is that there's all of these incredible like mechanisms built into the system so that you can protest, reform, course correct, like you said, and move on. And actually, America has this incredible history and a lot of evidence to prove that when we do course correct, we do a pretty good job of not going back to the same thing. Just look at the Salem witch trials. Look at slavery, look at women's right to vote. Like, literally, we have like the greatest track record of not going back to the dark ages when we like reform and move forward. And so that's something that this is not that. This is not about reform. This is about upending the entire system, revolution, oppression. But also, I think, just from an education perspective, and there's parents who are now like, I mean, these are not, and this is not like the University of Arizona, like I went to a state school, okay? This is people who are going to Vanderbilt, to Columbia, to the wealthiest schools in the country, the most elite schools. Also, I don't know, I could be wrong, and I don't have any evidence about this, but I would guess that the people who are like launching this full-scale attack on, Heinz Hall or whatever, or Heinz Hall, they're probably not in the School of Engineering. They're probably not in the school, like the business schools. They're probably all getting a degree in gender studies and humanities. And I say that as someone who has a degree in humanities. So like, I get it. You have a lot of time on your hands, and the challenge is not equal to those that are getting like a civil engineering degree. Like, we're not even on the same page. So they're not learning. That's what these people are paying. These parents are paying $90,000 for an education, and they have nothing to show for it. And I think that should be the greatest. You're talking about divesting. They're about to lose all of their great billionaire investors who are predominantly, I would, have Jewish ties and connections. And those people are about to to part ways with them. So it's all coming to the head. And I think in a lot of ways, the universities have been asking for this by compromising with these little fringe departments. Like, when I was in college, I wanted to get a degree in women's studies because I was obsessed with feminism as well. But then they changed it to gender studies. And then I was like, what the crap? Like, gender studies, like this was a woman's thing. But now it's just a random nothingness. There's not even a real human being studies. So that's what it's come to. And now 20 years, more than that. So even like the Vietnam protest, it really is kind of part of the same variation. I know that people are like, it's not to me, it is a lot of the same thing. It's the same sense of entitlement. It's the same kind of generational, I could be a child for the rest of my life. If celebrities are like 40 is the new 30, well then, 18 is the new 8 years old. I mean, like, that's literally like we're just like lengthening out the time that we stay young and immature, right? And that's what the scripture said. When I was a child, I acted like a child, but I see now I can't do this on the spot. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. And there's a lack of order in the world, a moral center that keeps the whole universe in one place. And now it's just like flying about. And I think this is what happens when you take God not just out of school, but literally out of the philosophical sense of being in the world. Like, if there's no truth, right?
Well,
it's like,
if you're calling for death to a whole group of people, and it's like, and we've seen this before. We've seen this before with like this same group of people, and nobody sees what's wrong with that, and nobody's like, wait, what the heck? Like, are you kidding me? Wait,
instead, it's white nationalism that's dangerous. It's white nationalism that's the most dangerous thing right now. It's the greatest existential threat to America and democracy is white nationalism. Well, even though there's actual, Nazi symbols on the campus.
This is what pseudo morality is that every time you turn around, the goalpost is moved. And it's like, but because it's pseudo morality, and I think that's maybe why communism was so, I guess, like, these types of people really kind of idealize communism, or they are kind of attracted to it because it's like this universal brotherhood, equality. And if you're honest with yourself, these are things that are established in a family. These communism, if you were to read like all of its statutes or whatever, you're gonna find that those things are done the best within a family unit, because those people genuinely care about you, they genuinely love you, whereas a state to the average person, they're looking at what you have. It's not, they don't love you.
You're just like another number.
Right. And it's just like, oh, okay, you know how to do that. Well, let's take that and work the heck out of you because, it's advantageous for us. So that's where, again, it comes down to the human heart, and it comes down to the breakdown of what God established in the first place, which is foundational, which is the family unit, and the things that God, the conscience, the things that God has written on your heart.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things there, but what you said about white nationalism, it's just always painted as like, the number one threat to America and to people, and of course it's evil and atrocious and all these different things, white, supremacy and all these different things. But actually, one of the things that we were talking about World War II, and in my class, and to all my classes, I said this when we talked about. So I was like, we collapsed in on Germany. Germany is about to give up, and Hitler kills himself. And then and eventually Germany surrenders. And I say Hitler killed himself, but his ideas live on. And of course, everyone's heads immediately go to white supremacy. The evil white guy in rural West Virginia. But then I said, yeah. But then I said, and we're seeing it alive and well in these college campuses with these protests, where they are not letting Jewish people come onto campus, where they're not letting Jewish professors enter onto campus, where we're seeing calls for from the river to the sea, which literally means for the complete annihilation of Israel. We're now seeing it with Joe Biden withholding aid to Israel during a war, which is what they wanted to impeach uh, Trump for withholding aid to Ukraine. So Biden again is doing the exact same thing, but it's different scenario, different cases. So it's not the exact same thing, but Biden is literally saying we're going to withhold, um, support to Israel. And I love what Benjamin Netanyahu, which again, I'm not some apologist for the government of Israel, but I've liked him. I've appreciated him for a long time because he's been in war, he's fought in war, he's put himself on the line, and so I really appreciate that from any leader. Um, but he said, we don't need the United States. Like we are going to keep protecting ourselves. We're going to keep fighting this battle, like whether with the support or not. And I was just like, man, it just kind of hit me. I was like, oh, man, gosh, God, change the heart of Biden, because I don't want to be a part of a world where we are treating Israel the way we have been treating them, and I would not want them to lose this war because we refused to back them up. And it's just a bummer. So it's a bummer seeing all of this. It's a bummer seeing so much just misguided support, I think, from a lot of these college students. Mike Baker, who is a former CIA, going back to what you were saying about all these kids protesting, Mike Baker, he said, they're releasing the arrest records or arrest reports, and he said that half of the arrests that are happening at these college protests are not even from college students. They're from people who are quote unquote professional protesters who are being funded by Hamas, who are being funded by people, George Soros, et cetera, et cetera. So my thing is the other half, they are kids, students who are obviously extremely just, I completely disagree with what they're saying and what they're standing for. But they think that they're being compassionate. They think that what they're doing is right. I truly believe that. Not all of them, of course, right? But there are some who are out there saying, "What is Israel is committing a genocide," and they're repeating the catchphrases, and they're repeating the slogans. And so I'm like, man, going back to what you were saying, Gwen, it's like they're open to something, right? Their heart is, they're willing to get behind something, and they're willing to outreach for something, right? Where we would say, it's Jesus that you should be, that's what you're missing. But are you guys seeing the same thing? Am I maybe going too easy on them? Because I feel like they do, some of them do have their hearts in the right place, as far as like, they're seeing what they deem as evil, when in reality it's just war. And in reality, war is an evil thing. War is an atrocious thing. Israel has every right to defend itself, and actually it's like civilian to soldier ratio, as far as death is concerned, is like the best ever. Like no country even comes close to how well Israel is targeting specific terrorist groups. But it's hard to only kill them when Hamas is hiding in schools and mosques and hospitals, et cetera, et cetera. But so am I wrong in the sense of like, or do you guys agree with that? Or maybe you have your own thoughts, but as far as like seeing compassion in their eyes, or are you just like, no, they're just completely, misinformed, and they know what they're talking about? I don't know if that makes sense, but Jess, I'll start with you, I guess.
So I have a couple things. I agree. I think that people want to do the right thing. I don't think that anyone thinks that they're doing the wrong thing. I think all of us are naturally filled with self-righteousness to the brim, which is the leading cause of evil, I believe, in the world, is literally our own rightness. So it kind of reminds me of just the children of Israel when Moses goes up to Mount Sinai, and God is giving him these explicit instructions of how he will be worshiped and who he is. And like, this is just so amazing to me about God, because God like literally tells us, like, no one is telling you to go out by yourself and figure this crap out. Like, I'm not like saying you should know how to worship me. You should know if you really felt, love, if you really loved me. Like, he tells and sets up this entire like meticulous system of how he will. And then meanwhile, the children of Israel are literally like spiraling into debauchery, and Aaron's creating this like golden calf. And so I think that there is this reality that's always juxtaposed together, and that is that people will worship according to their own instincts, and their instincts are backward and savage and lack enormous amounts of understanding of who God is. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. So having that lack just is a major problem already. Like, you are guaranteed to spiral into just the darkest hole on the planet. So this is, to me, it is a worship. It's an ideological worship. It's these people are worshiping in the only way they know how to, and the only way that other people, they're looking to their right and to their left, and they're saying, oh, that's how you worship, that's what morality looks like. Okay, yeah, me too. I want to be part of that too. So I think that, and then when you're young and you're impressionable, like, that's a very real way of worshiping. The second thing I would say, though, is that and to go back to the Bible, is, in the beginning, God, the earth was void and without form. And I've kind of had this thought for a while that I've looked into, and that is that, when you do not have an identity in Christ, and you do not have an identity of God. And back when I was going to college, everything was about like apologetics. It was always like, how do you talk about the Bible and defend it without actually using the scripture? I don't know if you guys ever, but going to college, that was how it always was. Like Ravi Zacharias, like, how do you create these really elaborate, smart arguments? Because remember, you can't use the Bible because they don't believe in the Bible. So you have to like figure out, which is insane to me. Because now I just like, if I can't use it, it's like saying go up to battle, but don't take your sword. Just, get a really good karate chop on them and you're going to be fine. And so now I look at that and I'm just like, the Bible clearly tells us that if you like, it is God who gives you your shape, your form, your meaning. And to go back to the postmodern world, like, that world is, words don't have definitions, words don't have meaning, everything is a signal. And so I do feel bad. I do think that those students are worshiping the only way they know how to worship. The second thing is that, or I said already, second thing. The other thing I would say is, just to slightly disagree, I personally am not crazy about Netanyahu at the moment. I don't think that this is a good look for Israel, slaughtering thousands of Gazian people. So I'm not, but you're right, it is war. And I don't know, this is where I'm totally in the dark, and I'm not an expert. And so I wouldn't say, oh, they shouldn't be doing this, they should be that. I'm not a military, tactical expert, so I don't know. But I will say that, biblically speaking, I do think that there is something very real about when the world goes dark. The people that they could hate in the material world are the Jews. And so this is a very easy way out. Like, if you hate God and you hate truth and you live in utter darkness, chances are the one thing in the material world that really has the full expression of the Bible are the Jewish people. And they all walk with a target on their head when it comes to the hatred of God. So that spiritual reality, I think, is there. And I don't know. I know that, America is allies with, with Israel. And I don't know how that's all going to work itself out. And personally, I will just say, I look like, every time I read an article, it's like, how is this going to pan out? Like, is this going to just be a full-fledged World War III? Which a lot of people, we don't want a nuclear war in America. I mean, I don't know about you, but I want things to, but at the same time, yeah, you have Hamas, and then you see Queen Rania, what's her name, of Jordan, just going around doing these sanctimonious interviews about Gaza and what's happening, and they're showing pictures of dead children in the background. And this is the lady that's face is like worth like $50,000 of plastic surgery, and she's like, and we, these poor, but they won't even let them become citizens in their country because they tried to overthrow the country in like the 1970s. So now they're like, okay, we're going to keep you guys in a little refugee section of. So even they understand the danger of Hamas and how it rules and reigns, and how it's supported and used as a little puppet for Iran and all these others. So the truth is, it's one of those things that it just feels like either we could put a band-aid on it, but if we go full in, you have to deal with Iran. You have to deal with radical Islam throughout the entire Middle East, even Jordan and all these other countries and Kuwait, all these other Muslim countries that have been sitting pretty nice with the United States, with making billions of dollars in oil and just like, you know, running their little oligarchies. Even they know this is not good, and I really think that they know it's not good because they're gonna have to make a choice. They're gonna have to say, do I choose radical Islam from the days of Khomeini, or are we ready to reform and move forward? And right now they have the best of both worlds. They get to support and show, you know, that radical, use that radical side, and then they also get to make a tons of money off of the West. And so I think they're the real problem in my book, when I see these little you know, countries in the Middle East who sit tight with both in both worlds, and they're the ones that I think are really, they really want this whole thing to come down, because they know that if we go after radical Islam in Iran, they're going to have to make some choices about where they stand. So I think I went totally off topic, but that's, I feel like, you know, there's all these self-interested people, because ultimately, if you're not trying to find the mind of God with a biblical worldview, you're just going to fend for yourself, right? And so everyone's kind of has their stake in it.
I think people who don't speak up for themselves or speak up when prompted end up in a way more terrible situation than they would have had they spoken. And so I think there's actually more risk in keeping your mouth shut than there is opening your mouth. And so that's what I have to say for those small little countries around Israel. But I slightly disagree with Jessica on Bibi. I understand where there could be there's a lot of gray, let's just put it that way. But I think nobody is as close to the situation or understands what it is to have lost in a situation like this than this dude. And you know, you look at his you know, obviously his background. You look at his brother being the number one casualty of the other hostage situation that happened, Yoni Netanyahu. So I think there are some people that, you know, kind of have an idea, and then there's those other people who have literally felt the pangs of all of this and what Israel is as a whole. And again, you know, you go down the history of Israel, and man, it's constant. There's something, there's always something, there's always somebody. And that's why Bibi said, like, if you're not willing to help us, then we're going to defend ourselves. And I was listening to a survivor of the Holocaust, and he was giving his the speech at, I don't know where, but so he was telling his story, and he said, you know, how people will tell him, how could you still love God, know God, even though he abandoned you? And he said, God didn't abandon us, humanity did. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. And so these people live with that in their hearts, that at one point God didn't abandon them, but it was humanity that abandoned them. And so why now are they going to start listening to the voice of humanity? It's like, dude,
That's true.
you know, you screwed me over back there. You know, today I don't care what you have to say. You know, you have no credibility. And so I'm going to do what I need to do in order to survive, because if I don't, I won't survive. And so I think, you know, rather coming back to all these people, these individuals at college campuses, I think it's again a pseudo morality where they want to be what is it called, virtue signaling, in a sense. You know, I'm a good person, I'm standing up for the oppressed, I'm standing up for the people who are you know, being killed, and children without will, you know, without any consent, all these, it's virtue signaling. And but I think a lot of these individuals, a lot of these people are, yes, I think, you know, they're misguided. Yes, they've become victims because they haven't exactly been protected. Again, family units do that for people. And if you don't have a strong family unit, you're going to feel unprotected. You're going to be at the center of the world for caprice. And that's a lot of who these people are. And so, you know, a lot of these people have a lot of issues. If you search down deep, you know, how many are these people in relationships? Are they, you know, are they are they successful in any way? Even then, morally inside their hearts, and all these different things, are they running from issues and problems and things that they've created since they were teenagers, you know, that they're things that they're just still trying to live down. And so because they're not willing to deal, they don't even know how to deal with the brokenness, the emptiness, the hurt. um this seems like a platform that they just need to climb on top of to almost just feel better about their own personal situation. It's like, you know, you can't begin to change the world if you can't even change what's in here. And so they're kind of skipping all of those wonderful little pieces of life and situation, um, and kind of going and raising some really ignorant sign somewhere on a college campus because somehow it makes them kind of feel like they've, you know, they're taking penance for the things that are going on inside. And so that's, I mean, I don't know if they're innocently doing what they're doing. I don't know how to, I don't know how to phrase that, but I think that's pretty much um that's what I think is happening there.
Yeah. And just one thing to keep in mind is that, you know, too, BB he does have a war cabinet. So like his, you know, his main opposition is inside this war cabinet. So they're all making decisions together. I know BB, you know, he does get the brunt of everything, and that's the price of being a leader. And again, I'm not kind of like what, you know, going back to what both of you guys were saying. I don't think anyone should ever be an apologist for any type of government. You know, Trump does something bad, cool. I agree with you. You know, Netanyahu does something wrong. I agree with you. But it's the principles, it's the foundation, it's the, you know, the beliefs that, you know, are worth defending. It's so in Israel's case, it's the, you know, the right for Jewish people to be alive, to exist, for Israel to be its own state, is kind of like what I'm like, okay, you know, for sure, like obviously I'm backing that. But I agree with you, Jess. It's like, hey, you know, the leaders are going to make wrong choices, and and I know it sounds callous, and I know it sounds like, do you have sympathy or empathy when I say, you know, this is war, and that's why war should be avoided at all costs. That's why two-state solutions have been presented for years. That's why, you know, to have a Palestinian state has been offered to the Palestinians for a long time, for years, you know. But like, kind of like what you said, Jordan's not accepting these refugees. Egypt is building a higher wall, to keep, Palestinians out. They're not accepting refugees. And so it's, again, Israel is getting a lot of hate, and I think forever and ever, kind of like just going back to biblical times, Israel will always get hate. The Jews will always get hate, which I think, you know, it's just because they're white, especially right now. People view them as white. I know all the Jews are white, and I think that's, again, people are just misguided on that. But they're viewed as part of like the white race, the successful race. They are the oppressor. They are the colonizer. They are, you know, what is wrong with the world. And so it's easy to just lump in these Jewish people along with, you know, the white race, and so that's why it's easy, again, to just hate on them from every single point, viewpoint, as far as like a leftist point of view. Do you guys see that same thing, or am I kind of just out to lunch on that one? Where
Um,
Okay.
oh, sorry, go ahead. No, you know what? It is weird. No, it's a weird, there's been a weird anti-Semitic thing that's been kind of evolving for some time. Even like, you know, Kanye and people coming out. Then there's a bunch of conspiracy theories that had to do with like Vladimir Alinsky and in the Ukraine, and then I don't know, just I can't even remember all of them. There's just a bunch of weird stuff that's been acceptable to
Yeah,
kind of lightheartedly poke fun at.
Ukraine had one of the largest Nazi parties and organizations and people that identified as Nazis long before the war was ever. So that Ukraine versus Russia was happening. So maybe that's what you were thinking of.
Yeah, there's just been a lot of weird, like weird, lighthearted Semitism, like where you're able to say certain things, and so I don't know. I think again, I think it's weird too because you have. I think the other thing is like there are actual Jewish people who are funding these also this same activism that's anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. Like, George Soros, his whole story is apparently that he was one of few people who survived the Holocaust and lost a ton of people in the Holocaust. So there's what we know is that the human heart, like Gwen said, is like it's a super complex thing. This is not a race thing. This is not like just a country thing. The thing that sets the Jewish people apart, if you're a Christian or a biblical believing person, is that they're the expression of God. They're his chosen people, that he works through them to fulfill his purpose. Jesus was a Jew, or is a Jew, he's still alive. But the idea that so it's a weird thing. I don't understand it. I can't understand the self-hating Jew. I can't understand these apologetic Jews. I can't understand people. So the anti-Semitism I think is really complex because even Jews who maybe like Whoopi Gold, like you said about being white. Whoopi Goldberg made a super anti-Semitic statement like 2 years ago on The View about how the Holocaust was like different because they were white people who were being butchered. I mean, to even be able to make and then she took some, she took some hits for it and people were not happy, but she's still on The View and she's still talking and saying so she didn't get canceled. So and it is weird because we know that Hollywood, we had the thing with oh my gosh, Weinstein, with the Me Too movement. So we know that the Jewish people, I think the story is that they've literally, as from the diaspora, they've been immensely successful every place that they've they've stood there, on every continent, every country, they've excelled. Albert Einstein was a Jew, like there's just so much influence that they've literally been a blessing to the world. I don't know if people realize that, but the complexity is that they're human people and they're individual people. And so, but the anti-Semitism is weird because one, it's been accepted like lighthearted and and there was, who was it? Even Bernie Sanders, he's Jewish and he's kind of hoggled back and forth. Schumer, he's now like moving over to not support Israel as strongly, but he came out. I mean, even Amy Schumer, who actually is related to him, to Chuck Schumer, she came out and took a lot of flack for coming out and really challenging everybody who had supported Hamas and the attacks or who didn't even speak up. Same with Jessica Seinfeld, who's Seinfeld's wife, Jerry Seinfeld's wife. So it's interesting, but there's been a lot of Jews who've had to like make a stand and say like, this is not okay. It's not okay to be lighthearted and anti-Semitic. Also, the other one who I was not surprised, but did surprise everyone was Candace Owens, who came out and she made some extremely anti-Semitic comments about how if you don't like to live in Israel, then why don't you just come to America? So I think what we're seeing is, I think that always there's this ongoing reality that the world, I believe, is according to God's word, and there's spiritual things happening. And it's strange to see the heart of man, kind of these things like manifest out of people in weird ways that you're like, whoa, where did I mean, I don't know. I've heard Christians talk like that where they're like, yeah, but there is a lot of people who have money and they're like using these really like anti-Semitic tropes that they don't even realize are anti-Semitic. And they're like, no, but it's just because they're so powerful and you're like, stop talking. Just stop saying that because you're playing into some grander threat, like Jews are a threat. Like just any hint of that is towards an anti-Semitic. And that's why many Jews even stood with African Americans during the Civil Rights Movement, because they understood just the slightest hint of how discrimination and racism, like it's because it's evil. And so anything like, sinful just spreads. But I don't know. I have no why. I noticed it too even before October 7th, how bizarre it was that you could make jokes about all these things.
Real quick,
Yeah.
Gwen, before and the thing is too, again, what's so like they're transparent about their anti, so they're not hiding it. But going back to the education, it's like, do we not talk about the Holocaust anymore? Or do you know about the Holocaust and you're okay with it? Like you want to see that happen again. So the it's like we've seen where this goes. Like this is not it would be like, oh, I'm just gonna have this person work for me, and I'm not gonna pay him, and no, that's called slavery. We know what we know what that goes, we know what road that goes down.
Right.
We know what road this goes down, where the Jews are. I even heard someone, this one a leader of Hamas came out and said, I hope all the Jews get rounded up in Israel so that we don't have to go out and hunt them down. And so, like, that's recent. Like, we see it. Like this is not, like we know where this can go, and yet it's like so widely accepted right now. Sorry, go ahead, Gwen.
I think it's kind of what Jessica had mentioned a while back ago about words just not meaning anything, I guess, to people, just because they're being thrown around everywhere, and then you kind of have like the social media aspect where it's kind of dumbed down a lot of things,
Yeah.
Oh, it was just a meme. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. But like when I was teaching an eighth grade world history, and so one of the kids had talked to me, said something, and in the conversation, and I appreciated him. He was on the wrong side of the fence, but he was smart. And he said, well, because you're white passing, you're white, aren't you? And I was like, I'm sorry, I'm white. Am I white? Is that what you're asking? And he's like, well, yeah. And I said, well, what does that even mean? And this kid was like, well, I don't know, you're racist. And they're kind of just throwing around this jargon, white passing, racist, whatever, all this stuff. And so if it hadn't have been towards the end of class, I would have been like, you're going to pull out that dictionary and you're going to read what racist means. Because again, I don't think people even know what the heck they're saying. It's kind of just this mumbo jumbo of words, this jargon, this like this this word scrambler, and they're just kind of saying it because that's what they heard. And so again, you're hearing all this anti-Semitic, all these phrases, all these things, and people are just kind of like, just it's real flippant, it's real, whatever. And if you say, well, we've heard this rhetoric before, and it resulted in a Holocaust. Do you want another Holocaust? They're like, whoa, you're crazy. What? You're out of line. What are you talking? And it's just like, you just said that. Every sentence you said up to this point all added up. If it was an equation, the answer would be, you're going to annihilate this whole group of people. Uh, and so I think just the day and age that we live in, it's this word jargon, this word scrambler. People just don't, they're not forced to think. They're not called on the carpet when they're just, talking trash.
Yeah, and actually, it was the leader of Hezbollah. Just correcting myself, it was one of the leaders of Hezbollah that said, I hope all the Jews round together. So, I currently teach history. Jess, I said I know you said that you have a new role in education. Also, so I'll start wrapping this up because I told them I don't have a whole lot to do today except for work out, and we're doing a live music tonight. But you guys are both, you have families and something that I do not have. Tears. No, but you guys have places to be and people that need you. So I'll start wrapping this up. But Jess, you said you have a new role in education. Gwen, you're a teacher. I'm a teacher. So obviously, with anything, whether it's with just this specific issue that we've talked about, but your beliefs, your values, your morals, all that stuff, starts in the home. I truly believe that kids, they, it's it's unfortunate that so much has been put on the teachers as far as like parenting is concerned. So a lot of that still should fall on the parents to establish um, and build a good foundation of morality in their kids. But I'll just say this, since that's, that's a perfect world. We live in an imperfect world. What is the role of the educator these days? The teacher, because I can preach love of country, which I think is, for me, the way I look at it. Obviously I'm a member in the military, but I'm like, I live here. I want this ship to to not sink. Of course I love this country. Of course I'm gonna support the president that is the pilot of my plane. So it's like, of course I'm going to like root for the best case scenario, but that's again deemed as like, oh, you're just right wing. I'm like, no, I love my God. I want us to be successful. Like, I want us on the right path. Like, that's crazy. Oh, but it's so trendy to hate America. And that's, we already talked about that. But so what is the role of a teacher? I know I probably will have some teachers that listen to this, whether in Tucson or wherever, or even some people I might work with might, catch wind that I do this. But what is the role of an educator? What is the role of a teacher? If anything, I guess, to teach morality or to teach, um, talk about these things. Jess, I'll start with you.
Okay. So I think that there are like two ways that I just speak for myself, but that I try to use my, I guess I don't even know what I'm saying. Where I tried to use my own like convictions, right? So the two things are, one, I try to serve in whatever capacity. Like when I look at what I'm doing as like a ministry, like you are serving people, and because you're serving people, you are to act with as much integrity and character. And it's hard to work with people that you're just like, oh my gosh, how did you get here? But when you end that conviction of like, eventually I'm going to give an account. Like the beginning of wisdom is fear of God. Like that's just the second part is I try to think in whatever I do, in all the work that I do. I think of it as the premise, the origin of my thoughts, that they come from the Bible. Like they has to be based in a biblical thought. So for example, like even when I coach a teacher, I talk to a teacher, like I said before, like back in college, I didn't use a lot of scripture, even in my writing or anything, because it was almost like I'm going to have to try to formulate this in a different way. Now I use scripture for everything. Even if I'm doing like a professional development, I'm like, what does the Bible say? Like, what does it? And then, but what's to me is how much it clears people's thoughts. That's what's so amazing, is that the Bible, the scriptures are so powerful that they literally are living light, that just like, oh yeah, that's true. And so one of them, for example, would be like,
Hey, Jess, if you can hear us, just pause what you're
your
saying.
class, what does it look like? The first 10 minutes of your class, yada, yada, yada.
Hey,
Where do people
hey,
sit?
Jess, real
Yeah.
quick, you paused for the last 10 seconds. If you could just repeat what you just said.
Okay, I don't even remember what I just said. Anyway, what I'm saying is I would use scripture, and like for example, if you go in someone's class that's pure chaos and we sit and we talk about procedures and how to think about that, I will say, like, what does it say in Proverbs? Like, raise up a child in the way they should go, train up a child. So we have to make the assumption that children are not born trained, right? So I believe that like every single premise of how to think about the universe is in the Bible, all of it. Like there's a scripture. What takes scientists 40 years takes God like 7 words. He's like, why would you eat of a animal that's been torn apart by a beast? Like you're going to get a disease and the whole people, all of you guys will be wiped out. So it's amazing. Leviticus is amazing. So those are the two ways in which I try to operate. But on the other side of that, just when you're right, in the work that I do right now, I believe that, and God's kind of helped me with this, and whatever beef I have with the politics, I actually work for a super leftist organization, like super left. Like I took a survey on how Mexican I am. That's how ridiculous. And I got a 61%, which I'm very upset about.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
but the
You're
point is that
61% Mexican?
61%, which is not bad, but not great.
What would your Nana say about
Or
that?
not, for not speaking, you would probably get like a 37 because you're white passing. No, but what God really began, because I get so vexed about certain things. I mean, LGBT, everything, it's all there all the time. But God kind of like encouraged me and convicted me and was like, just put things in order and all of these things will start to fall to the wayside.
Right.
Just align everything. So you know about this with education, you align everything to the standards. Like try to get people to read and do math, and guess what happens? All of that crap, that critical race theory, all that crap, it just begins to you shed it, because the natural order of things is that God is objective truth. And when you align things to the truth, then all those other things, they don't. Right now we have a vacuum in education, which you can see in higher education. You see this vacuum because people are not, there is no objective, there's no objective truth. So how could you write an objective on the board that's like, this is our goal, we're trying to learn something? You can't do that anymore because there's no source of truth. Everything is just literally anything you feel that morning. So anyway, so that's kind of like in my own personal work that I do, and we're trying to do a lot of work to get people to read proficiently and yada yada yada. And it's actually really fun, but that's kind of like God's like, don't look to the right or to the left, just keep aligning everything to what is true. And what you will find is that it's true to challenge students to think critically, to believe that God's created every person in his image and he has a purpose for them, and your job is to help them learn to read and grow and develop so that they can represent themselves and have a voice and not outsource their thinking to, Hamas or whoever.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that's exactly what education was such an epiphany, I guess. Because if you couldn't, how do you keep people down? You take away their education, and so that's basically what we're kind of dealing with here is kids or people who are uneducated. And so, like we talked about, a lot of these protesters are just like Joe Schmo. He's like 34 years old, just kind of never had a cause, was always just kind of a weirdo anyway. Like, and he's kind of showing up at these campuses. I'm not talking about that person. You're too old. You need to go figure some stuff out. You're done. I'm talking about like the young, like teenaged, mid-20s down type of individual. These are the people that my heart aches for. And as an educator, you're kind of realizing how lost these people are. They're literally in the middle of this abyss, and that's how they feel. They may not, they may not tell you that to their face, or they may tell you all their problems. But a lot of them feel that they're just lost, and so they're latching on. They become hosts for these antics that are happening, whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's this, whatever, you name it. This is why they're finding their identities and all these things. And the Bible is clear. It says older women teach the younger women. And that's not, and we've all seen it, older women are like, why do they do things like that? And they don't listen. Like, but I think as an older generation, you're wiser than that. You're smarter than that. Don't just sit there and complain. Find a way to reach them. And okay, fine. If they don't want to be reached, okay, you've done your part. You've tried. But don't just give up when they're snarky and sarcastic. That's just part of being young. That's just who they are. And you have the the commission. You've been given the commission to figure it out. Teach the younger ones. And if you have to sword fight with them a little bit verbally, well, then do it. But win them over. And this is what the Bible talks about. The Bible talks to young people. It says, "Let no one despise your youth." I'm not here to be like, these young people are so stupid. They're just so lost, and they're just so. I'm not about that at all. I believe there is such a wealth in being young. There's a sense of risk that they don't know and they don't care about. Whereas older people are like, no, don't do that. You're going to die. Like, whereas younger people are like, who cares? Let's do it. There's a sense
Yeah.
they're without fear, and that's there for a reason. And if you can, as an educator, as a person, as a mentor, you can speak into the life of a young person because you know who you are, because God has changed you, because God has delivered you. You have you've been given the commission to make a difference, to do something, to figure it out. Yes, it's hard. Yes, people are people, but that's not good enough. When you stand before God and you're going to be like, they were annoying. Like they say stuff like, oh, they're a simp, and or they say stuff I don't even understand what they're saying. God's like, and
Yeah.
so what? And I think there is, there's it's our God has given us um instruction, and he's saying, be a ping on the radar, be a sense of direction for these kids, speak potential. Me and Jessica just talked about this the other day, speaking potential, even just seeing it in the kid. Sometimes, you know these kids are so caught up in the words that have been cast on them, that have been given them, the labels that have been given them, not just by people. I'm not talking about people, I'm talking about parents, like people who meant something to them, that spoke things into their lives. They're so caught up in that emotionally. They're so just thinking about, well, this is all I know. This is all I know how to do. And if you have somebody who comes in and speaks, well, why don't you do this? You're really good at this. You're really good. It jogs their thinking. Like, wait, I am? What? There's almost like this thirst inside of them that longs for better, longs for more. And they just need somebody to be like, yeah, you've got that. You've got those characteristics. You would be a great fill in the
Yeah.
blank. And it just comes down to that. Just a person who is mature, who can choose words wisely, who can just bring some direction, and who will see the potential in their youth rather than just being like, oh, you're young, you're stupid.
If I could say one more thing, you know what's
Yeah, go ahead.
weird about getting old is that, like, you realize that your window of time of when you were that young, risk-free person, has kind of closed, and you have responsibilities. But the great thing about being in education, and even being in ministry, but in being in education and working with young people, is that, like Gwen said, you see the potential in them. Like, you realize, like, and there's a lot of, like, very disillusioned people as they get older, because they're like, ugh, I never did this, and I'm already 40, and I should have been here, and I should have been there. I don't even believe in those kinds of timelines. I think that's absurd. But like, I feel like I'm gonna hopefully hit my peak at like 73 years old when I finally reach that. But when you are working with young people, you have this incredible connection to this potential that is the newest generation. Like, I remember looking at the styles a few years ago, and like literally overnight it went from millennials to Gen Z, and everything was Gen Z baggy clothes, and it's the greatest thing. In fact, I love Gen Z style way more. Millennials were the worst. But so but it's weird, because it literally from overnight, like, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, we're old now. Like, those are like not dominating the airwaves anymore. So it is kind of interesting. But I do love being in education, because God, first of all, it's a ministry, and it's a service that you provide to your community. And I mean, you guys know it's real work. Like, it's a pick up a shovel, God, show me where the gold is, and then you just start digging, and God starts helping you to figure out, like, how to reach certain people. And I believe every student has a path to them that God's given them. But I do think that when you have the wrong people in that position, to them, they just see a clean slate, that pobrecito, they have too much trauma, let's just tell them what to think. And that's the enemy of, I believe, what God wants to do in people's lives. And this generation is, I believe the real problem is that people are not challenged to think critically. And how can you know God if you don't have wisdom, if you don't have knowledge, you don't have understanding? Like, so the devil does everything to deceive people into just, like, you're always learning but never coming to the knowledge of the truth. Like that's literally TikTok. And it's a woman specific scripture actually. So I'm like, how did the Bible already knew about TikTok? Like that women were going to sit all day on TikTok and be like always learning but never coming to the knowledge of the truth. So anyway, I would say that, like, if you want to get old but not stay old, like, or if you have to get old and you don't want to like actually get old, work with young people, because they will just like, you'll always feel like you're attached to the future.
Yeah, and I kind of made this. I made like the teaching plug at a conference. I think it was last year. I was like, man, we need people in the education system that are Christians, that are God fearing, that love Jesus. Because if not you, then someone else is gonna do it. Again, going back to like what I was saying earlier. If you're not gonna do it, someone is going to fill that role. And if it's not you, then it's going to be the next closest person. And the next closest person could be the pro Hamas, hating the Jews professor that is
Mhm.
going to be the loudest voice inside that student's head. And so you're
Yeah,
absolutely right.
and it's like there has to be a like a contending for God. I need your mind. I need your words. I need your eyes for this specific kid. It's not, you're not living vicariously through these kids.
Yeah.
Please, dear God,
Yeah.
like
Which I
you're
see I
doing
see a
that.
lot of
Come
I
on.
Go
see a lot of
away.
teachers
Yeah.
do.
Yes,
Right.
yeah. And it's
Who you
like,
dating this week, Johnny? I'm like,
yeah, and
bro,
you're
who
just like,
cares? Leave
well,
that kid alone.
yeah,
I
like
know
Johnny
that's
needs to go take a shower. don't ask,
so
don't ask Johnny about his dating life. But anyways, yeah, I think it's like educators don't, you're not living through these children. You're not reliving something that you just never had. You're getting the mind of God. You're getting the eyes and the heart for these specific individuals.
Yeah. For sure, for sure. And we could probably keep talking, but I know you guys have kids that are probably like, why is mom just abandoning us for the last 2 hours? But so I appreciate you both setting time aside. Um, I want to do this again. And so hopefully we can make it happen. But I appreciate you all. Thank you for listening. And I'm for sure going to have both of them on again so they can talk and share their thoughts about some other things. But Gwen, Jess, thank you both. Did you have anything else that you wanted to say or shout out, or any books that you want people to read or anything like that? Just quickly.
The last book I read was about Amy McPherson and Semple
Mm.
oh,
McPherson.
was it
Uh,
Sister Amy?
yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
not gonna, I'm not gonna, not gonna put that out there.
Good old Foursquare.
Yeah. But so that was pretty interesting. There's also emotional intelligence. That was pretty cool. And then James Dobson's Dare to Discipline, the revised version. That
Oh,
was pretty
I
good. So those are the last
there is
three.
a guy that like I'm really obsessed with right now. I shouldn't say it like in that way, but his name is Jaishankar. He's the external minister of India. And Modi is like having a moment right now in India. And this guy is so unapologetic to the West. It's like the greatest thing I've seen in so long. Not only that, like Larry Borgard, who's an evangelist in our church, is has been going to India, and there's just like this incredible revival breaking out. And it's weird, but I don't know. So God's just like been putting India on my heart like for a while now, and all of these different like factors. I won't get into it, but anyway, the book I'm reading is Why Bharat Matters, and it's basically his argument as to why India is like has this special place in the world. And so I don't know where it all goes, but it's just really fascinating because they're bringing this democracy, but then there's a spiritual thing that's happening on the other side. And this guy is just challenging, Blinken and every American leftist who thinks that they know how brown people are and think and should be. And these people are just unapologetically like moving forward, getting rid of is like radical Islam in their country. So anyway, so that's kind of like what I've been looking at for a while. But also, I right now I've been reading a lot of just like teacher books, like feedback, feed forward, like dumb stuff like that. So yeah.
Well, look, I mean, all that stuff is going to be helpful if anyone wants to hop on those books. I've been reading. I'll give a shout out right now. My brother Adam is working on a book, and so I've been reading through that. It hasn't been released yet, but I'm going to be talking to him once it is released. That way we can, talk about what's in it and kind of like his inspiration and stuff. But it's called Divine Wilderness, and it's Pastor Warner is reading through it, and so it's gonna be amazing. I can't wait to talk to him about it. It's already blessed me in my life, but it's not out yet. But I just thought I'd give a shout out. Thank you both for doing this. Thank you everyone for listening, and I'll see you guys when I see.